I want to thank you all for coming. My name is Heather Balchunas, and I'm with the Somerville Arts Council. And we're very pleased to have this artist talk with the school, with the Museum School graduate program. This is in collaboration with the Inside Out Gallery, the window in Davis Square, that the Somerville Arts Council hosts different artists and organizations each month. And Lisa, the Dean of Admissions, came to us and wanted to collaborate and to have a student exhibit here in Davis Square, and we were thrilled to collaborate. So without further ado, I would like to introduce the panel that will be discussing their work. We have Shweta, Johana, Anna, and Mi-sung. And Shweta was the student who organized this whole thing with the fine work of her peers. So I'm going to let her introduce about the process and to talk a little bit about her work and about the program. So without any further ado, Shweta.
Hi, everyone. I just want to say thank you, especially to my wonderful friends, for giving us some of your time and coming out tonight. Just to touch on what Heather was talking about, the work that we currently have up at the Inside Out display is part of our first year show. And basically what that entails is, as first year graduate students, we are allocated various spaces and galleries around Boston and Massachusetts to show our work and the things that we've been creating during our first year in school, asking us to really think outside the box and to experiment with our current art practices. Being Tufts students as well, the Somerville Arts Council and Heather really provided us with this great opportunity to bring our artwork to the Somerville community. That being said, I must say that each one of us, we create very different kinds of work in terms of our process or media, and even to some extent ideas. Yet when we look at our creative practices together, there's this congruence as we each take individual approaches to reflecting on experience and identity. For me, thinking about how does one begin to identify? What frames and forms one's identity? I think these are really relevant questions to my practice. Does one's roots, or does one's roots, as I would say it, or as Americans would say it, like routes, what forms your identity? And I think in most cases it's both. So I started out in this program, and for the most part, for the past few years, have been working primarily as a painter. I was born and brought up in India, and initially being 8,000 miles away from home, it really made the vibrancy of my home country influence what I was painting. The rickshaw is a recurring object in my work. I grew up traveling and going to school in one every day. So memory plays a very crucial role in what I do. And I began looking at how does our mind choose to retain certain memories and then ignore others. India is a land of many cultures and traditions, where unlike here, there is this strong sense of, I think, a national identity, and everyone identifies as American. I think back home, I always felt that there was more of this state identity. So you'd say you're Bengali, or you're Gujarati, or you're Tamilian. And my upbringing in India was very liberal. I come from very mixed parents. I have a Bengali Hindu father, an Anglo-Indian Christian mom, a Muslim American stepfather, and I think I was always allowed to explore culture and identity with a very open mind. It was a mixed mash of tradition and religion. And we moved a lot, both in India and the US. So I never felt bound to one particular place and the cultural idiosyncrasies associated with it. I think this, for a long time, led me to a lot of feelings with regard to uncertainty, and my paintings became a way for me to preserve and prove something for a long time. with regard to where I believed or I had thought in that moment I belonged. It stemmed from either I couldn't fit in every time I went back on vacation, or that I spoke the language too poorly, and the self became a matter of perpetual negotiation. And it was during my first year at SMFA, I really began to research the various cultural dispositions that begin to form the physical and verbal manifestations of a person. And I was trying to express movement in a form, and that's with the more abstracted pieces. They're free from any social, economic, and political form. And even with the next few paintings, memory bubbles with the lines, different vehicles I traveled in going back home. But I think I really hit this point when, just a short story, I was coming back from India on one of my trips, and I handed my documents over to the customs official here, and he handed them back to me, and he was like, "Oh, welcome back home." And I was living in Omaha then, and in my head I was like, I just came from home, but at that point Omaha had also become home. And so I really was interested in this portable nature of home, and what does home mean to me today. And that's kind of what I was trying to explore. But when I joined SMFA, I think with all the readings and everything that we do in class, I realized that, just painting was not enough for me. I wanted to share a story, and I thought, what better way to do so than to actually tell stories? And so that's what this new work is about, which is very, very different from anything I've previously done before. To break it down, the text is a mixture of English and Hindi alphabets based on the English phonetic, and it really refers to my struggles with my native language and reconstructing it to make it my own, and just how the weaver would would make the sari and use it as his to then create different patterns. I use the sari as my canvas, and I gesso the top, and the tension between this, something that's very Indian, being the base for the gesso, which is a very Western art material, and the tension between the two really reflecting the tension that stems from hybridity. And the stories are not just, they have pivotal moments in my life. They have no conclusive endings, but just stories that have inspired my creativity. And this piece was really about a time when I really came to realize that, probably home was never a place, and it was always a person. And in this ethereal home that I began to frame, I framed it in the people that I met and the values that I hold. And the social fabric that then began to frame me they were memories, thoughts, ideas, but more importantly, they were people. And in that, I realized, one, the perpetual nature of my work, but also the importance of vulnerability. And so the stories are from my diary, they're from my journal, and they talk about just snippets into a time, moments, a choice I made, maybe a revelation I had, but experience is very linked to my practice.
And even though I have never formally participated in the art world, I had always had a passion for photography. And the more time I spent working in the hardware business, I found myself torn between taking a 50-year-old business into the next generation or pursuing a path in the art world. As you can see, I took the second path. I wanted to make photography a reality for myself and learn how to exist and thrive in an art world, convey my ideas, interests, and experiences with others, and have meaningful conversations about them. To me, this meant leaving my family behind and joining an MFA program. I began my journey about 3 years ago by taking my own art practice more seriously and started investigating my own interests and experiences through my photography. Since I grew up and worked in a hardware store, I used that environment as inspiration and a place of investigation and discovery. I began really looking at what was going on around me, and I found myself fascinated by and inspired by a coworker. She was our part-time high school stock girl. At the time, Tori was a sophomore at my alma mater, an all-girls Catholic high school just a mile from my home and my store. Did I mention I grew up in a really small neighborhood? Tori and I had very similar backgrounds, yet we were very different. She was the product of the digital age, and I can't tell you how many times I would catch her during work taking selfies or tweeting or Snapchatting. I became fascinated with her digital behavior, so I decided to take a closer look at her through my photography. My first step was to take Tori's portrait, but to be completely honest, I had no idea how to make that vision a reality. All I knew is I was fascinated by her social media use, mainly the way she so freely photographed herself and posted it online. My goal was to take Tori out of her element. No makeup, no digital camera, no filters, and photographed head-on. Did I mention I had no idea how to do this? Because I had none. I fell back on my hardware background and I built studio lights out of PVC pipe and household light bulbs and made a backdrop out of PVC pipe and a black sheet. Through much trial and error, I came up with a formula that allowed me to move forward with my original concept. This was not an easy task, but armed with Netflix and pizza, I was able to get the job done. As it turned out, the girls were not only the ones taken out of their element. I was photographing people I'd never met before, and being on the more shy and introverted side, it was a big challenge for me to sit one-on-one and take their pictures, but through the process, I started to develop my photographic voice. My original intent was to take the most honest portrait of each person possible. However, as I began to photograph more girls and put their portraits together, it became more about the group than the individual. Through my work with the girls, I became interested in photographing more people. So for some contrast, I turned to teenage boys, then finally older men and women. On the first day of school, I was involved in a 6-car collision on the 93 heading into Boston. Don't worry, it wasn't my fault. I'm a good driver. I didn't quite make it to class that day, and for a while after that, I had no desire to get in a car and go places unless it was absolutely necessary. The way I imagined the beginning of my grad program and the reality were completely different. Everything felt really chaotic, and I found that coming out through my work that I was attempting to make at that point. I found comfort in staying in my house most days and drew inspiration from photographers like Sally Mann and Uta Barth, and began photographing the curtains in my house. After several rolls of film, I began seeing these lines, almost like horizons, the closer I got to the curtains with my camera. What I call interior landscapes began to shape in abstract forms, and I ultimately saw the next couple of slides, saw them in a triptych rather than single images. Go to the next. This is the work that is currently on view at the inside-out windows at CVS.
In my process, I was very obsessed with just color and paint itself and how I could create relationships with that, as well as space and shape. And I didn't think about much else besides the process of painting. While I was there, I also decided to take up sculpture. We could go to the next slide. And I would create room spaces and doll houses like this, where I would make handmade Play-Doh and create objects with them, and then I would cover them in lipstick. And I wasn't ever sure of why I was doing it or how to explain it, so I had a difficult time with that. Once I got to the SMFA, I felt as if I was surrounded by people with ideas a lot more bigger than mine, and my paintings felt very insignificant in comparison. So it pushed me to ask myself what was important to me. And then suddenly my sculptures of doll houses and the other pictures that were supposed to be there were just, I would make little families. Those became obvious to me, and it was just that I spend most of my time dreaming about my future. And when I do that, I think about my future home and family. So I started to combine that concept of desire with my existing painting sensibility. So my work that I've been doing since then has been looking at interior spaces, household objects, imagery, and abstracting them through color, shape, and space relationships. I create my paintings with a very frugal and economic sort of process where that I attribute to how I would go about running a household using less money as possible and using whatever works. I also started, when I realized how expensive canvas was, I thought maybe I could use bed sheets as canvas. So first I did that for the economic reasons, but then I realized how much I liked working with the patterns. And if you can see in this one, I used a bed sheet that had roses on it, and you can see it in some of the areas. So in this, I've been just trying to create spaces of my desires and dreams that I have yet to experience. I don't have pictures of it, but currently I'm working now with embroidery and using objects that are more personal to me. So since I've been painting on bed sheets anyway, I had a blanket that was given to me as a gift that after a relationship with the gift giver ended, that blanket was no longer useful to me. So I decided I could use it as a painting.
First of all, I'm pretty much concerned with glittery word. I mean, behind the glittery word for the gambling and people's addiction. From my personal experience, my father had gambling addiction, I guess. I can remember his face, even I don't know where he is now. So when I got into the SMFA, I'm starting to more concentrate on what I'm considering like addiction stuff, because when I was young in my high school or whatever university, I'm kind of like hiding my feelings or with my this experience, I guess. I don't know why. Probably I feel like more shame. I don't know. So this one is, I used to do like drawings or some painting stuff. This is what I thought from the gambling card. And there's some word like from my mom or father or lost or money is one of my poker card. This is the paint drawing, pen drawing on the tracing paper. So this is the processing. So the next image is also I draw all 43 or 5 card. We are actual size of card, and then next one is I draw a whole bunch of card. So with this card, nobody can play the card. I don't know why. I just ruin the real function, so non-functional gambling. And for the next image, also one of the, I heard this is like Japanese card. It's like small one, so it also can see inside of the card, so nobody can play this card. So I made it and then draw this one. It's kind of like meditation, I guess, because after I draw a whole this card, my neck and this whole part was really hard because I really had to concentrate on what I did. Mm-hmm. Anyway, and the next image is I draw the coin. Actually, these days I'm collecting the lotteries on the street that people abandon. This is really interesting because lotteries and the cigarette, yeah, all things people pretty much love this. And people scratch the lottery. So with that, the way how people scratch, so I draw the money with the scratch of pencil. So I kind of interested in subject matter as well as how I'm gonna transfer my idea with some specific way. So, and is I also interested America gambling So I draw the gambling chips into diverse way, like this, something like face or whatever. The next one is also, this is like sweet and bitter. Even we choose the candy in an everyday life, there's like diverse taste, but every time, every moment, the people gonna choose and find their way. So I think every day and like really basic or like what is it? A small piece of object can be related to people's life in a variety of ways. So I choose candy with that is the poker chips candy. Yeah, there's no clock in the playing. So why not? So I just make a clock into the roulette things, and I just set up and see like a objective drawing. I kind of want to talking about loss or people's lose hope. I mean, losing hope, something, their dream or whatever. So I'm trying to figure out in the SMFA school, and it's really good to talk about here, not in Korea, because here's a lot of people and a lot of experience. Mm-hmm. This is really, really influenced a lot of me, like hearing a lot of thought and process, not only me suffering like this stuff or whatever, so I can kind of understanding a lot of people's stuff. So thank you so much.
Now before I open it up to question and answer period, there's a couple questions that I have for you all. First of all, thank you so much for sharing all your stories. There is such a wonderful thread of your work, even though your work is very different. From my personal perspective, it's a very kind of meditative and therapeutic process, and very personal. I mean, a lot of artwork is personal, but for all of you, this is very personal, and I want to thank you so much for sharing that with us. Some of the questions I have for you. This is actually the first time that we've actually had a student graduate work, and this has been very exciting to work with all of you. Now that we're nearing the end of this particular process, and you're involved in your graduate program, what direction and what avenues do you wish and want to explore after your MFA program has ended? Shweta, if you have the mic, so would you like to answer that question?
I think I'm just at the beginning, I must say that. But I think one thing I've really learned from our school is that we're stronger as a group than we are individually. Mm-hmm. And I hope to make really good collaborations and when I'm done with school, and yeah, that's what I look forward to.
Along that same line, I'd really like to establish a good community, and I think SMFA does a really great job of fostering that sort of environment and carrying that on, once I get out of school. And also, I'm currently taking a collections care class at Tufts University, and I'm also interested in kind of the behind-the-scenes museum, restorative, and just how they take care of their collections and how they keep them going for years and years and years.
I'm hoping to be able to go into teaching after graduation. The faculty at the SMFA is really inspiring, and seeing the relationships that you get to build with them is something that I would like to be a part of.
To me, actually, I learned a lot from how to think and how to see the world through the really good professor. So it's really good to see and meet a lot of professor and the lecturers as well. Also, I also looking forward to teach, but like the children's. So I think, so how to balance between the teach, be an educator, and also be an artist. So in SMFA, the professor, they're really good at I think, because they're really good too. So I think I'm gonna probably learn like that stuff.
Excellent. So you can keep the mic for just 1 second because I have another question. And this is and this is kind of the overall final process. From its entire inception, from this particular exhibit, what are your final thoughts about the process? Has it, as far as collecting your work for the exhibit, installing the work, has it changed your perception about your work? And what is your takeaway from this whole process?
Yeah, this is my first outside of school exhibition, so I've never imagined like.
In a very unique space too.
Yes, but because why I choose CVS, because people get the lottery or the stuff from the market, so that's why, oh my God, this is gonna be my place. So I chose the CVS. It was really lucky and fun, but I didn't expect the space and the scale of the place exactly and not like accurately. So with this process, I learned a lot to prepare how to exhibit and to communicate with the director. Yeah, it was really good.
Good.
Through this process, I learned that it's always better to be over-prepared. I underestimated how much work I would need, so I came over with just a few paintings and had to go all the way back so I could bring more to fill up the space.
Thank you for doing that.
I think the biggest thing I took away was, thinking outside, less linear. I'm really kind of OCD, and I just thinking outside the box. We had to think of a way to install my work so it wouldn't get lost next to Shweta's beautiful sari, and also come out, because the exhibition space is so unique. You can really get lost in your space in the window. So just really thinking outside the box and thinking of different ways to install my work.
For me, I think I learned a lot about working with a group, and I think from Heather, I think you really showed me patience, and that's something I really got out of this. But just looking at my work in the space today, I went back home and I drew out different ways I want to install the sari, because it does come off sometimes when just laid flat. It looks like a curtain, and that's not something I was too fond of. But yeah, I think it just taught me different ways of installation.
And I hope that this has inspired you to explore new ways of hopefully working together and other people, and think about space in a whole different way. And I really thank you for your flexibility and time. And I'm sure you have lots more to share. And I'm going to open it up to some questions that some people may have about this lovely work that we saw. Any questions? I'm sure there's some questions. Why don't you come here and ask your question?
So my whole life, I've done all sorts of kinds of art. I've been in musical theater my whole life. I did it professionally for a little while. Always drawn pictures. I did photography for like 2 years. I got paid for all these, but I've always been pretty good at it, but I've never been like super passionate about any specific thing. But my parents have always been like, oh, you should go to an art school. That's what you're really good at. How do you know which one is the right one? Because everyone's always like, oh yeah, that's good, but that's also good, and that's kind of thrown me for a loop. What made you guys know that what you guys were doing was what you should be doing?
Should I answer this? Okay. There's this really cool thing called Dundee. I don't know if you know what it means, but it means soul. Or I don't know if anyone's ever seen this movie called Fitzgeraldo as well. But it's this great movie that talks about passion and the various types of artists there are. And I guess when you wake up every morning and there's nothing else that you want to do other than just create, that's when you sort of know that that's what you should do. And then there's nothing else that personally for me, that I would rather do. And yeah.
In terms of choosing a place, I think that was your question. I think I applied to 10 schools, and I think I got into half of those. And the reason I chose SMFA was, one, the feeling I got when I went there, and the people I dealt with along the way. I felt like they really cared about me as an individual, and they also wanted me to come to their school. I didn't get that from the other schools. It was more like, oh, you're lucky that we are even considering you, type of thing. And in my interview, I felt like it was more of a person-to-person conversation, and instead of one of the interviews I had, people interviewing had never even seen my work, and they were looking at it for the first time as they were interviewing me. And it was a really cold feeling, and I never got that from the museum school. So that was a big reason why I chose, and just the area and things like that too. Anybody else?
Yeah, kind of similar to that. Just going to schools and visiting them and seeing the environment and where you're going to feel best, and just what works best for you. The SMFA, specifically, they're really big on being interdisciplinary. So if you want to try everything, schools that are interdisciplinary would be good because they encourage experimentation. And yeah.
Actually, I don't know what I'm gonna do after this MFA program. So like, it makes like my future also really foggy. Like I can't see my future, but I'm pretty lucky. I think I'm a pretty lucky person. So I also, one of my interview, the professor Magda, who accept and understand pretty much personal work. So that's why I was able to choose and start to study here. So yeah, just follow and just live a moment.
Also, I just want to say, I thought she was talking about why we went or decided to pursue art. Not this. Yeah.
I think it was a two-part question, so I think you all answered it in some fashion. So I think it was good. But I think that's this might be a good segue because I just had a thought. What are some of your own personal inspirations as far as like who inspires you, what artist inspires you? Because we all draw from something. So would you like to start?
Yeah, actually, I'm studying painting art from the high school and university for a year, more than 10 or something like that. So I was kind of sick and tired of paint and draw, but I think that is not because of drawing the matter. I think because of subject matter. So what I'm gonna draw is what I couldn't find at that moment. That's why. But after that, I saw Felix Gonzalez Torres, the artist from, I don't know, but his work, like objective sculpture, like candy files, and his work pretty like poetic. And I don't know why his work changed my life and changed my work into diverse way and see the diverse way. So always Felix Gonzalez Torres work and something poetic makes me a lot of inspiration.
My inspiration comes from, well, what I talked about, kind of my desires of domesticity. And artist-wise, I started looking at an artist named Frances Barth, and she works abstractly and creates these kind of believable landscapes that seem like they have some sort of narrative, but they don't make any sense, really. So I like working in that sort of way.
I would have to say that I'm really inspired by a lot of photographers that are dead, or mainly photographers that use film and, analog cameras. I don't use a digital camera. I use the most traditional items that I can get my hands on. So I said Sally Mann earlier, Uta Barth. I mean, they're still alive, those two are. But Sally Mann used wet plate. I mean, nobody does that anymore. I mean, just artists along that vein, because using a view camera or various other film cameras, I feel more connected to what I'm doing, because from the start to finish, it's all my hand. I'm putting the film in. I'm taking the pictures. I have to slow down a lot more, especially when I use a view camera. It takes me a lot more time, a lot more thought to take the picture. And then I also am developing the film myself, so I like being connected to my art practice in that way.
For me, if I had to pick an artist, I would say Alfredo and Isabel Equilizon. They're Brisbane-based husband-wife team that look at the hardships of migration, that I really enjoy their installations. I also do like the work of El Anatsui. But yeah, there's those two.
There's so many. There's so many things to be inspired by. Now, does anybody else have some questions? No? Okay. Well, with that, I think we're going to wrap this up. But if you like, the artists are going to be here for a little bit more. We can have an informal Q&A if you like, and have some things in the lovely cafe. And I do want to thank both the Museum School and Tufts for this opportunity, and also Somerville Community Access Television, who is taping this, and also for the Arts of the Armory for letting us have the talk here, and also to the wonderful artists who participated in this month's exhibit at the Inside Out Gallery. Let's give them a nice round of applause.